So the Odyssey is out in theaters, everyone's hyped, and I just have one question. 10 years. To sail roughly 600 miles. That's about 2 weeks in a decent boat. So either this man invented the scenic route, or none of it ever happened at all. And weirdly, both answers lead somewhere real. The internet, meanwhile, is busy arguing about whether the ship in the movie is historically accurate. In a story with a Cyclops, quick warning, full spoilers for the movie from here on, obviously. Now, I'm not an archaeologist, which is exactly why you can trust me. Here's the game. We walk through the movie in order, and every time it shows us something, we ask one question. Did any of this actually happen? Every answer gets a stamp. Documented, debated, or myth. And when something's thin, I'll just tell you it's thin. So the movie opens where the war ends. A giant horse on a beach, and one Greek left behind to sell the lie, Cyclops, who dies for it in a hail of arrows. The film turns him into its secret hero. Odysseus even takes his name later. Small problem. Cyclops isn't in Homer at all. He's from the Aeneid, a Roman poem written 700 years later by Virgil. Basically fan fiction with a budget. Verdict? Documented, as somebody else's character. And the horse itself? There is no wooden horse in any excavation, any tablet, or any layer of anything burned. Even the ancient Greeks side-eyed it. The travel writer Pausanias, almost 2,000 years ago, figured it must have been some kind of siege engine, because nobody in Troy could possibly have been that stupid. But here's my favorite theory. The city's great walls really did come down around 1300 BC, to an earthquake. And the god the movie picks as its villain, Poseidon, god of the sea, and of horses, and of earthquakes. A poet, centuries later, turning the earthquake god's own animal into a wooden trick. Unprovable. Gorgeous. Verdict on the horse? Myth. The city, though, the city is stone-cold real. And here's what everyone knows. Heinrich Schliemann discovered it in the 1870s. Except the guy who actually found it was Frank Calvert, an Englishman who literally owned part of the hill, dug the first trenches, and told Schliemann, "It's here. Dig." So Schliemann dug, Schliemann found, and then Schliemann spent the rest of his life carefully forgetting Calvert's name. He also carved a 50-foot trench straight through the Troy he was looking for, to reach a Troy 1,000 years too early. And he announced Priam's treasure, gold that dates a full millennium before any Trojan War could have happened. A historian named David Trail went through his diaries and settled on a 2-word review: pathological liar. Verdict: the city, documented. The discovery story, myth. And the war? The Hittites, the empire next door, wrote everything on clay, and their files survived. In those archives, there's a city called Wilusa. Say it next to the old Greek name for Troy. Wilios. Yeah. Around 1280 BC, a Hittite king signs a treaty with the ruler of Wilusa, a man named Alaksandu. Now, in Homer, Paris of Troy has a second name, Alexandros. And in that same treaty, one of the gods guaranteeing the deal on Troy's side is written as Apollonius, Apollo, the god who defends Troy in the Iliad, on a legal document. There's even a letter where a Hittite king mentions, kind of in passing, that he'd recently been at war with the Ahiyawa, very possibly the Achaeans, which is literally Homer's word for the Greeks, over Wilusa, and then made peace. A war over Troy, filed as diplomatic small talk. Then the ground itself. Around 1180 BC, the city burns. Unburied skeletons in the streets, piles of sling bullets, which is what you stockpile when you're losing a siege because the winners take their ammo home. The archaeologist who found all that, Manfred Korfmann, was once asked point-blank whether the Trojan War happened. His full answer was 2 words. Why not? Verdict: a city, documented. A war over it, debated. Homer's version of it, that's the myth part. Okay, so the war zone checks out. Then the movie sets sail and the map goes insane. A Cyclops, giants, a witch, a door to the underworld. And here's the fun part. The ancient Greeks didn't treat any of that as fantasy geography. They pinned it to real places on a real map, and Nolan, knowingly or not, kept filming on them. Start with the Cyclops. Nolan reportedly shot Polyphemus inside Nestor's cave in Greece, an actual Bronze Age site. But the Greeks themselves put the Cyclops on Sicily. Euripides set his Cyclops play at Mount Etna around 408 BC. And in 1914, a paleontologist named Otanio Abel offered a reason why. Sicily's caves are full of skulls of prehistoric dwarf elephants, skulls with one giant hole in the middle of the face where the trunk attached. Find one of those in a cave, having never seen an elephant, and congratulations, you've met a one-eyed giant. Verdict? Debated, but suddenly very reasonable. The sea monster snatching men off the deck? The Greeks had an address for that too, the Strait of Messina between Sicily and Italy. Thucydides himself points at its whirlpools. And the underworld. The movie sends Odysseus to where the river of fire meets the river of ice, so Nolan filmed in Iceland. The Greeks went further. They built actual oracles of the dead, real temples where you could go talk to ghosts. One of them, the Necromanteon on the river Acheron, was dug up by an archaeologist named Decaris starting in 1958. A door to the underworld, with an entrance fee. So, verdict on the whole monster map? Debated. Even the ancients argued about it. The geographer Eratosthenes said, around 200 BC, that you'll trace Odysseus's route the day you find the cobbler who stitched the bag of the winds. Oh, and Ithaca itself. Nolan cast the Sicilian island of Favignana as Ithaca, which is a deep cut because that's the same island some very old theories called the Goat Island of the Odyssey. The man shot the myth on the crime scene. Which brings us home, and to Nolan's sneakiest move. In Sparta, Telemachus meets Menelaus and Helen has a scar across her face. Menelaus laughs at the songs about her beauty launching 1,000 ships. Now, that is in no source. Not Homer, not Virgil, not anywhere. Nolan just invented it, which breaks our whole scale. Not documented, not debated, not even ancient myth. It's a brand new mutation added in 2026. And honestly, that's exactly how mythology works. The movie even says it out loud. Stories warp with every retelling. You are watching a myth mutate in real time, in IMAX. So is the real Ithaca even Ithaca? In 2010, a Greek team announced a 3-story ruin on the island, at a site literally called the School of Homer, and suggested it was the palace of Odysseus and Penelope. Their colleagues were, let's say, unconvinced. Meanwhile, a British businessman, Robert Biddlestone, spent years arguing, in a Cambridge book from 2005, that we've had the wrong island all along, that Homer's Ithaca is really the Peliki Peninsula next door, which may have been a separate island back in the Bronze Age, before earthquakes stitched it onto its neighbor. 20 years later, still no palace on either one. Verdict? Debated. And the man himself? The bow, the beggar's disguise, the dog who waited? There is no tablet with Odysseus's name on it. No seal, no grave, nothing. Verdict. Myth. For now. This field has been embarrassed before, but here's the biggest thing Nolan did, and almost. Nobody's talking about it. He deleted the gods. In Homer, Athena walks around, argues, intervenes. She personally ends the story. In the movie, the gods never physically appear. Athena is a vision. And in the final act, you learn whose face that vision is wearing. A priestess that Odysseus's own men executed at Troy. The gods, the film quietly suggests, might just be guilt. The opening narration even calls it an age that only seemed magical. And that idea, that the gods were never really up there, is not modern. Around 300 BC, a Greek writer named Euhemerus published the most scandalous book in the ancient world. The gods, he wrote, were kings, real men, conquerors, builders, benefactors. So impressive that after they died, the stories just kept promoting them, century after century, until they had thunderbolts, and he had an Exhibit A. On Crete, Locals would show visitors a tomb, the tomb of Zeus, the king of the gods, the immortal one, with a grave you could go stand on. The poet Callimachus got so offended he wrote his rebuttal into an actual hymn, spitting the old island proverb, "Cretans are always liars, because a god with a burial is not a god." Later writers even offered an explanation. The stone, they said, originally read, "The tomb of Minos, son of Zeus," and the first words wore away. History's most consequential typo. Is that story true? Verdict? Debated. It comes from a much later commentator. Was there ever a real tomb of a real Zeus? Verdict? Myth. But here's the part that actually matters. The fact that the sharpest minds in Greece spent generations seriously arguing over whether their chief god used to be a man, that part is documented. The idea even has a name, euhemerism, and it refuses to die. Because almost 15 centuries later, an Icelandic chieftain named Snorri opened the founding book of Norse mythology by stating, completely straight-faced, that Odin and the gods of Asgard were men, refugees, from Troy. Yeah, that Troy. This story always comes back to the same burned hill. So that's the series, the men who became gods. Egypt turned a real architect into the god of medicine. We still have his name and his job titles. Rome made Julius Caesar a god by holding a vote. And Greece kept a grave for Zeus. Next episode, the full case for a human Zeus and the 6,000-year-old piece of evidence that might blow it up. Every name, date, and stamp from this episode is in the description. Go check my work. That's the entire point of this channel. And keep the oldest rule of this story in mind, because the whole series runs on it. The answers to the end are in the beginning.